So you can pencil in J.J. McCarthy as QB1 for the season, but what should we actually expect from him? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. And you all know the drill. If you're an everydayer, it is Tuesday. That means it's Town Hall Tuesday. I am taking your questions as submitted to me, primarily through the Google form, which is linked in the show notes of any episode. If you have that Google form bookmarked from forever ago, it has changed. But hey, if you have a question you want to ask me at any time throughout the whole week, put it there. I'll collect them over the week and I'll get to them on Tuesday. Also, if you have a hot take you would like to confess anonymously, you can use that Google form to do so as well. And we will get to some of those at the end of the show. And oh my God, you all, every single week we have done this, there is one that just puts my brain on the floor. And we did it again this week. Can't wait to share it with you. But first, some questions. The first one comes from Botanical Jared, who asks, how should we view J.J. McCarthy coming into this season? With the rookie year lost due to injury, it would be easy to just consider this his rookie year and go from there. That being said, he has gained the advantage of being in the NFL facility for a year, spending time in meetings, learning the system, and learning how to be a pro player. I think you put it really well, Botanical Jared. Yeah, it's a tempered... I think you can say there's going to be, like, you can expect that there's going to be some first-year stuff, some lessons that everybody has to learn. Like there's a lesson that every quarterback has to learn who in college loved to zip one to the quick out and knew that they could really zip it even if it was like across the field, because corners just didn't drive as fast in college as they're going to in the NFL. And even though the hashes are further toward the middle, which means that throw to the edge of the field is going to be a little shorter, corners are faster, and everyone's got to throw that pick six. He's just got to do it. Everyone's got to throw that pick, like you just, or throw that dropped pick, right? You have to do it. Like that kind of stuff is still going to happen, those practical things. But if it's, he doesn't understand the system, or, you know, if it's some like super obviously simplified system because he's a young quarterback, we got to go, okay, what was he doing all year last year? So while I think we can call it like a sort of a rookie year, what I don't want to do is just excuse away anything that goes wrong by saying, oh, it's just his rookie year. Like, I don't want to do that. Like a more extreme example of this would be Jordan Love in 2023, right? Jordan Love had ups and downs, and I think a lot of stuff can get excused away because it's your first year starting, but you did have 3 years to learn. So like if you're misdiagnosing coverages or screwing up at the line of scrimmage, those kinds of things are going to be a lot harder to excuse away than, okay, he just went a little slow this time because, you know, actually getting on the field and it's faster, right? Like the actual practicalities are going to still have growing pains, but hopefully the preparation will not. Josh asks, do you think there's a possibility that the reason the Vikings haven't brought in a QB to pretend to challenge McCarthy is because they think there's a character concern there and they think he wouldn't react well to having to earn the job? Like, that has happened. That's not a far-fetched idea, but I do not think it is the case here. I think J.J. McCarthy, honestly, is mentally pretty willing to go in and compete with somebody, and that was what they were going to do last year. So I don't think that they're just like suddenly seeing him as this mentally fragile guy. Like they had Sam Darnold in the building before they even drafted a kid last year. They seemed pretty committed to doing that, which is why my read on it is that it is like a trust in J.J. McCarthy. We don't need you to beat somebody. We know you're going to be our QB1. All we need is a backup. Rick Spielman 2.0 asks, if you had been the GM of the Vikings offseason, how would you have handled things differently or the pursuit of different players? Boy, that's a tough one because I really like free agency this year. I love what they did in free agency this year. Not just like, I know that it's really easy to get excited about a whole bunch of players, even if they aren't good players. It's just really easy to get excited when there's a flurry. Somewhere in there's going to be the guy that you like. But I really found there's like 2 moves that I don't like, and one of them's like Jeff Okudah. Like, and who cares about that, right? Like, Jonathan Allen, I was calling for that. I love that. Jordan Mason, I have loved him all year last year, ever since he came into the national consciousness. I'm like, that dude's actually a good running back. They found a way to get him. I love keeping Byron Murphy and Aaron Jones. Here's the things that I guess I wanted that I didn't get. And I don't want to do this in hindsight. I will point you to what I was saying before free agency. And here's what didn't line up. I would have loved to get another serious corner. Isaiah Rodgers, in terms of what they paid him, not as serious of a corner. Maybe he'll outplay that contract, but it seems like they moneyballed a little bit there. I would have loved to just go get an expensive guy, spend some of your money. They got like 30 mil in cap, right? I probably wouldn't have done the thing that they're doing, but with like borrowing so much from 2026 that it ends up being a cap debt, I probably wouldn't have gone that far, but I certainly see why they did. And I could absolutely see the world where like that pays off so much and that the costs of doing so are so low that it ends up being way smarter to do that. Like, I don't think I would have done that, but I don't think I would have been right to not do that. But I think the big one is I would have kept Cam Bynum in the building and not just like handed the job over to Theo Jackson, which seems like what they're doing, unless they do something in the draft. Different idea, right? If they let Cam Bynum walk, they draft Malachi Starks. That's probably something that's close to a way I could have handled that position if I were the GM. But I guess I would have just gone a little bit harder on the secondary. And if that means that I can't go get like a Ryan Kelly, probably a decision I would make. But that said, those feel like little adjustments around the edges, you know? In total, the free agency that they did, going after, the veterans that they did, navigating the comp picks the way that they did, awesome. Absolutely love it. Better than I ever could have executed if I were in the role, which is why I'm a podcaster. Ben Koski asks, Ben, I looked at your name for like 10 minutes trying to figure out what the Ligma joke was. I couldn't figure it out. Asks, how do you feel about Blake Brandel at LG? The rest of the line looks stacked. The line does feel stacked, doesn't it? Blake Brandel probably the weak point there. I think Blake Brandel is an up and down player. I think that he's cheap and he plays like he's cheap, put it that way. And I think he's somebody you can upgrade on eventually, but I don't think it's a dire need. I don't think it's like an unserious thing to trot Blake Brandel out there again. It's not like Dakota Dozier was for me, where I was like, every day that you put this guy on the field is like an insult to everybody who's paying attention. Like that was a lot. I don't think Blake Brandel is nearly that bad. He has actually some really great moments too. Love him as a puller. I just don't like him in stunts. Love him on a double team. Love him in a zone block. But sometimes he gets cooked on the outside. Like, it happens. But 4 out of 5 ain't bad. I'm really happy with the line. Skol from Czech Republic. Ahoy hezké úterý. Did I do that right? Asks, at pick 24, we want to trade down for more picks, but is there any one player we can't pass on? Yeah, a trade down's a good idea, and it's one I'm super in favor of, but I do think that there are a lot of players that fully make sense to just like send it at 24. Kenneth Grant is one of those if he falls. Tyler Booker if he gets there. A couple of safeties people are excited about. Malachi Starks, Nick Emanwari. Derek Harmon has gotten a lot. I don't know if I feel great about Derek Harmon just like raw at 24. I think if they traded down a little bit, then took Derek Harmon, but got a little extra for that, I would feel better about it. There are a couple other DTs that you might like there. And hey, there's always guys that like you didn't think would fall that far, and if they do fall that far, like people talk about Malachi Starks at 7 at points in this offseason, but I've seen him in mock drafts to the Vikings, so I guess it's a realistic enough thing to like mention. But yeah, there are a bunch of players I think that totally makes sense to stick and pick, but you certainly don't have to. If they don't like those guys the way I like those guys, they end up trading down. You're not going to hear a complaint out of me. Unless they trade back from somebody like Kenneth Grant that I'm like really high on, then I'm going to start bringing up Kyle Hamilton a lot. Somebody who says there's Kevin, but there's no shot. This one's Kevin asks, why are people obsessed with drafting a wide receiver at 24? We're spending $200 million in money at the wide receiver position, as well as multiple first round picks already on our roster. I talked about this with Tyler on Friday, on 4-0 Fridays. The idea of a wide receiver. The idea has to be, to me, predicated on we are not going to give Jordan Addison his 5th-year option. We're going to let him walk. This guy's going to be a starter. He's going to be a key cog in the offense. He'll be a role player for his first 2 years, and then a pillar of the offense his next 2 years, and then he's going to be the one that gets the extension. And I don't know who that guy is in this class, but for me, it has to be about being really in love with the guy. Like Tyler, super in love with Luther Burden. And it's not about the Vikings seeing wide receiver as a need. It's about really loving Luther Burden and finding a way to make that work. So if you've got a guy, you've got a guy. I'm not going to pay a lot of attention to the wide receivers this year. I'm going to tell you right now. If you want wide receiver takes, you're going to have to find them elsewhere because I just don't think that, unless there's a guy that's just like, holy crap, he's super perfect, then you can make it work. You can make those assets be efficient. Okay, great. Wide receiver stays a little bit cheaper for a little bit longer, but it's got to be a guy that you think genuinely upgrades on Jordan Addison, and I am pretty high on Addison. I don't think that that's realistic. I have a bunch more questions and some of your insane hot takes coming up here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. March Madness is well underway, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on all that action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. It's $200 extra bucks to use on anything from buzzer beaters, Cinderellas, late comebacks, unexpected runs, or even heavy favorites to win by 25.5 points or whatever. Whatever it is, just put $5 down on something you're super, super confident in. And it can even be a super short odds money line, like, a South Carolina women's win or UConn to beat somebody, right? I mean, you're kind of running out of those. We're getting deeper in the tournament, so you're running out of like super freebies. But if you can find a really nice freebie or something you're super confident in, put $5 on it. If you win, you get $200 extra dollars to use on whatever you want in bonus bets. That's 40 to 1 odds. 40 to 1 odds on any bet, no matter what the odds are. Seems pretty good to me. Go to FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Moving on with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you want to see a couple of film breakdowns, I've got a couple now up on my Patreon, trying to get that thing updated a little bit more now as we get closer to the draft. Patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. Will Fries and Ryan Kelly, and then one on Jordan Mason. Going to do a little bit of draft stuff next. Next question comes from Valentin from Germany. Hallo und einen schönen Dienstag. I hope I didn't botch that. Says, last season, the Vikings defense used a lot of dropbacks from the line to confuse the offense. Is that something we can expect Allen and Hargrave to also be good in, or do we expect less disguises? So you've actually stumbled into a really interesting thing that Brian Flores changed last year, which is that they didn't have the D tackles do that. So no, I do not think I would expect Allen and Hargrave to drop into coverage a lot. They did. Everybody will sometimes. In basically every defense, there will be some sim pressure that puts a D tackle in coverage. And all they got to do is hit a landmark and get their hands up. Like they're not really covering. They're just placing themselves in a landmark spot drop zone, and it's part of a grander pressure plan. But the Vikings used to do that a lot more with their D tackles in 2023. That turned out to be really exploitable. Remember, they fell apart. They went because Zach Taylor cracked their code, and then the Lions put up 40 on them or whatever, and then Jordan Love smoked them. That was caused in large part by the exploitability of the fact that you could get the Vikings to put their defensive tackle into coverage way more often than they would prefer to. So they took that out of the rule set. And now the guys who go into coverage are much more under control. You're not going to see Harrison Phillips in coverage ever. And I'm going to imagine that Hargrave and Jonathan Allen are the same. Valentin also asked, my wife has recently started listening to Locked On Vikings with me. Her favorite player is Andrew Van Ginkel. Do you have any fun or lesser known fact about him that you could share? So I don't know how deep your wife is in Andrew Van Ginkel, but he played quarterback in high school. That's an interesting one. He hails from Rock Valley, Iowa, and he actually spent all of last summer helping them through a catastrophic flooding event that they had. It's a heartbreaking and heartwarming story at the same time. Matthew Collar wrote about Andrew Van Ginkel's whole journey. And I think if Matthew Collar wrote a profile about the guy, and you like the guy, go read the profile. He's phenomenal at that. And I also did an entry into the Everyman series, which, if you don't know, that's the series where I go through the backstories of every new Viking. So last year I went over Andrew Van Ginkel's, went over a lot of the broad strokes there. You can go back into the library of old Locked On Vikings episodes and find that. I bet your wife would like it quite a bit. Botanical Jared has another one who asks, is ownership the most important part of building a franchise? It seems that the franchises that are terminally mediocre at best all have a common theme. An owner that is too involved or doesn't want to spend or just doesn't really care. It feels like these teams will never get out of their rut. I think a fully hands-off owner can be a fine thing. Just let the football people do their thing. As long as you hire good people, you'll do fine. If you didn't hire good people, you'll fire them until you do have good people. I think that works. But yes, honestly, I think you're cooking here. Ownership bad ownership, nothing ruins a team more consistently than bad ownership. And I think the Wilfs ownership is having like extraordinarily visible dividends toward the Vikings right now, with the way that, free agents have talked about being here, with like, for example, Daniel Jones choosing to be in Minnesota basically just because the facility is nice, because the Wilfs spent a lot of money, were willing to spend a lot of money on it, and then that directly turning into a compensatory pick. Like, that is just such a direct dividend from ownership being willing to like spend. And then you have all these moments in like, Cincinnati or Seattle where cash spending becomes this problem. Like, the Vikings got Will Fries because they were willing to give money up front, like cash up front. In a big signing bonus, which they want to do for cap reasons anyways, but crucially, the owners need to be willing to sign that check, and they are. Yeah, absolutely huge. Is it the most important thing? It's probably still quarterback, but obviously ownership has a lot of say in that kind of stuff. And an owner like Woody Johnson, who will, tear his organization apart at the seams to placate that quarterback, will do a lot of damage. I think you're cooking. John asks, which country has the largest following out of the U.S.? I'm in Vikings following outside of the U.S. I'm in the U.K., and the Vikings are pretty popular here, and I've seen them play 3 times in London now. Yeah, it's probably the U.K. The Vikings have tried for a decade to get U.K. people. They've been competing really hard with like the Jaguars for that market. I'm going to guess that like Nordic countries probably like the Vikings for obvious reasons, but that is 100% a guess. And Nordic followers, if you're in Sweden or Norway or even like Iceland, where we took the skull chant from, the soccer team, let me know if it's like a lot of Vikings fans around there, if everybody's like randomly like Titans fans or something. Blimby asks, put up against each other, would you rather take the Vikings O-line or D-line? Great question. We'll see this play out in camp. It's hard. Okay, that's a tough question, I think, because I'm excited about the free agents on both sides of the ball. But that said, I think I'm taking the O-line because of all of the players in the whole team in the trenches. Christian Darrisaw is the one that I trust the most. And I'm allowing myself to take a fully healthy Christian Darrisaw. I know there's a question about him right now, but Brian O'Neill I trust. Ryan Kelly, a little long in the tooth, but very much a veteran. Will Fries, I think, is an absolute stud. I'm like so stoked to have him. 4 to 5 spots, really good. And while I like Phillips and Allen and Hargrave in the middle, I don't think I like them as much as I don't think I like any of those guys as much as I like Will Fries. And as much as I like Van Ginkel and Grenard, I don't like any of them as much as I like Christian Darrisaw, who's genuinely, I think, one of the best players in the league at his position. Skull Nation asks, I'm new to the nitty-gritty details of football, despite being a lifetime Vikings fan. Other than Madden, what do you recommend using to learn offensive schemes, defensive packages, etc.? So, for offensive schemes, my best recommendation for books right now is these Bobby Peters books that I have a whole bunch of right here. He just actually wrote one about the 2024 Vikings. This is like the 2024 Vikings playbook is in here. Like, it's got diagrams on everything. It's awesome. He has written like 600 of these about everybody. If you're worried about him divulging all the Viking secrets, don't worry. He did the Packers too. I have the Lions one here. So he everybody, 49ers, Rams, I've got a couple of them. They're often behind me. Usually I have the Vikings one here behind me. Guess I'll fix that up. Those are great for scheme. I think he does a great job of concisely explaining the points of different play calls and the nuances between what, outside zone versus mid zone, or, why would you have your tight end line up in line versus out wide if you're going to run stick, like that kind of stuff. That gets you thinking the right way. But for a more entry-level thing, I always recommend the Crispy Brown books, the Smart Football. There's a book, Take Your Eye Off the Ball. I think that one was by Pat Kirwan that I think is phenomenal. Blood, Sweat, and Chalk is phenomenal. That's a pretty good Amazon list. That'll get you started. And then if you're still not sated after all of that, then I say you work to clinics. Go to CoachTube.com, pick something you like, be willing to drop $25-$30 on something, and learn away. It's basically a big PowerPoint presentation that's going to give you a sense. It's geared, and those are geared toward coaches. Those are geared toward high school coaches who need to teach players how to do this stuff. So you're going to get it like really, from the source. This one I think is Kevin, because I think Kevin would ask something like this. Asks, why shouldn't the Vikings have the worst odds to win the division? The Lions and Packers are running it back with double-digit win teams, and the Bears have a proven good QB compared to McCarthy, who was a worse prospect and an unknown NFL QB signed. Oh, man. Proven good when you're talking about Caleb Williams. I know you're not being serious, Kevin. Okay. Signed better IOL players than the Vikings did. Highly debatable. and a better DT than the Vikings did, highly debatable, while also having the best play caller in the division as their head coach. Shut up, Kevin. That's what I have to say to that. Kit Fisto's dental plan asks, Taki Taimani earned a solid role early last season, but never got back on the field after injury. What do you see as his range of probable outcomes for year 2? It is a tight group. There are 6 players right now that either have made the team or are virtually guaranteed to make the team if they're new. Those are Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Taki Taimani, Jalen Redmond, and Levi Drake Rodriguez. You're probably looking at cutting one of those, and forget about it. If you draft somebody, you're definitely looking at cutting one of those, right? I mean, they could keep 60 tackles again. There's nothing stopping them from doing that, but I do think that like those guys, those bottom 3 guys all have to earn their keep again. So I am looking at Taki Taimani as a guy who needs to earn his job again. I love his odds to do that. I think he's a very good player. I think he's a great rotational piece. Very happy with him as like backup Harrison Phillips, but I think he's going to have to fend people off to win that job again. And if he does get cut, he'd be the kind of guy that I don't think makes it to the practice squad. So you'd be like worried about that, right? You'd probably be losing him. But with the embarrassment of riches the Vikings have at the position, they're probably going to have to let somebody there go. So that's where I'm at. And in terms of like his actual like contribution, he'll be rotating. I don't think he takes Harrison Phillips' job away from him, but he will spell the guy, and the better he plays, the more you're comfortable spelling him, the fresher everybody gets to be, so you're happy about it. Okay, it's time for some hot takes. I need you all to sit down. I need you all to get somewhere very calm. I need you to put on, like, if you need music, if you need tea, I need you to get ready for that, because the takes are spicy, and they're coming at you next. All right, moving on. With Town Hall Tuesday here on the Locked On Vikings podcast, you all sent me your craziest takes anonymously, okay? I'm protecting your anonymity. I'm not trying to expose anybody here. I'm not trying to call anybody out here. I am a wall between you and reason, all right? And I don't want you to feel like you need to be reasonable. So I have ordered these in, I think, ascending order of hotness. Okay, so we got the coldest takes first. Like this one from Scoliosis. The Vikings will trade out of the first round, will somehow get 2 seconds, and use one of those second-round picks to draft a running back. I don't think that's insane at all. Aaron Jones, 2-year deal. Jordan Mason, 3-year deal. Aaron Jones is older. Both those guys have injury histories. Totally not insane to use a second-round pick on a running back, if you ask me. Not like the most pressing need that I would like give to them, but if they didn't, I wouldn't be like, what running back? Like I would if they took like a tight end. So sure, I think that's a room temperature take. Blue Dot in a Red Sea says J.J. McCarthy will be top 3 in MVP voting, and Jettis will win Offensive Player of the Year. Blue Dot in a Red Sea, I admire your optimism in a number of ways. J.J. McCarthy, this person just said their name was J.J. McCarthy, so I'm assuming that literal J.J. McCarthy is a listener to Locked On Vikings. Thank you for listening. Good luck. Says, J.J. McCarthy was a better draft prospect than Caleb Williams. Cook. And Caleb's rookie season only proves that his negative habits from college will directly cause him to be a bad NFL QB. Cook. Look, I've probably gone harder at Caleb Williams than is fair. I think his NFL career turned out worse than I thought, and I was lower on him than a lot of consensus. I had him QB3. I personally still had him above J.J. McCarthy. I can't get on this wagon with you, but if you have receipts, power to you. But I had McCarthy QB4, and I thought the gap between them was pretty small. So I'm not like, I can't quite get all the way there with you, but I do feel like I was on the right side of history there, versus the people who said that, Caleb Williams would come in and immediately have them being Super Bowl contenders, which like people had the Bears as like a dark horse Super Bowl pick last year and they won like 5 games. Like, get out of here. But it goes to the question from before, like, a proven good quarterback. He is not proven good, man. Like, he had a pretty rough rookie season, had some flashes in there, but there's work to do. Like, significant improvement in that offense needs to be made. And for the Bears, they just have to hope that like the additions they made on the line in particular, I think are huge. And that Ben Johnson versus Shane Waldron is so much of a big like improvement that all the problems magically wash away. And I still think that there are some problems innate to Caleb Williams that we saw in Chicago and at USC that need to be addressed. And we'll see if Ben Johnson is able to do that. Oatmeal Raisin Cookie Fan says Harrison Smith should retire. He's moving into RPG territory. We could have a roster that makes a significant playoff run, and I'd imagine the 36-year-old safety would be a player a lot of teams target as a weakness. Okay, I'm going to piggyback off of this for a hot take of my own, which is, so I was listening to Access Vikings with Ben Gessling, Andrew Kramer, and Emily Leiker, and they were talking about Harrison Smith coming back and how the Vikings essentially made a choice between Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum. They were going to extend one and let the other go. Once they learned that Harrison Smith was going to return, they kind of said thanks, but no thanks to Cam Bynum. At least that was the speculation. And assuming that that is truly the case, I think that that is a mistake. Everybody boo me, okay? Be mad at me. You can boo me, okay? I accept it. I take responsibility. But I think because Cam Bynum, longer term future, right? And I think you get a little more bang for your buck on the player that Cam Bynum is versus the player you can expect Harrison Smith to be. I think they made a little bit of a sentimental decision there, and I don't know if it was best for the football team. That said, you're not going to see me suddenly become a hater of Harrison Smith's or anything like that. And I think Oatmeal Raisin Cookie Fan has gone a little further than I would think, knowing hearing quotes from other teams as they came into games against the Vikings, in particular Aaron Rodgers, for the Jets, like pressers in London, being like, yeah, we're still pretty worried about Harrison Smith. Like, he's still very much a guy. You still kind of got to know where 22 is at all times. So I do think that he's actually more of a stress to offenses than you're giving him credit for, even at his age, because his game is not predicated on athleticism at all anymore. It's all predicated on deception and, tricky tricks, the kind of things that he does. And it's really, really cool. Definitely worth breaking down someday on a Patreon. I regret not doing one last year. Maybe it'll be an off-season thing, or maybe I'll get to it next year or something like that. That said, long-term, what you can... I think they kind of paid a little bit for what Harrison Smith did versus what they can expect him to do in the future, which is one of those cardinal sins. But it's not the kind of thing you're going to hear me complain about any more than 29 minutes into a Town Hall Tuesday episode in the hot takes part. Selling in Stillwater said, boo me, keep booing me. Selling in Stillwater says Dallas Turner is traded by the trade deadline. I guess that probably isn't when you would... if this is a Dallas Turner is a bust take, that usually comes to pass over the offseason. That usually isn't a deadline thing too much. Teams approaching the Vikings about Dallas Turner at the deadline would have to still think he's got something, and they have to be a team that thinks that that's what they need to put themselves over the top or whatever. But if it's a Jalen Reagor situation, that's more of a March thing. But hey, go ham. It's the hot take section. Tomato soup is the worst soup. That's not even the take. That's just the name that they gave me. Says we're more likely to lose the Super Bowl than have a losing season. The 2023 national champion is stepping into the biggest safety net a rookie QB has ever had. That is so funny that you say that, considering the Bears narrative last year. But Cook. And if he goes down injured, then an experienced vet steps into the same situation, I would assume, but okay. If even half the free agents miss, we still have a great class, and JJ is going to sit behind the best line we've had in years with the pocket awareness we haven't had in years. Okay, that's true, Cook. Teddy was pretty good at that, actually, but I don't want to get in trouble today. Any more trouble today. JJ was handpicked by the QB whisperer that turned Kirk into an MVP candidate and Sam Darnold into a 4K plus passer. We'll probably lose in the playoffs, but man, we're going to have fun doing it. KOC is the heir to Bud, and I'm in love with Kwesi. What a roller coaster. You got to stick to lose the Super Bowl. Don't say we'll probably lose in the playoffs, though. We're going to make it all the way to Super Bowl. Stick to that. Be specific there. Look, the playoffs is a loser factory, right? You get 14 teams in the playoffs and 13 of them lose in the playoffs. So that is not really a take about the quality of anybody's team. The Bills were a juggernaut. They were the best team in the league a couple years ago. They lost in the divisional. It happens. But I love the optimism in this mailbag. Everybody is hyped the hell up. Digging it. The last one comes from Fries Tibia, who says, I don't understand why Kwesi is not renewed by now. He's doing all the work. Coach of the Year, Kevin O'Connell, would be close to dismissed if it weren't for the unpopular analytics Youngblood GM. Haboom. That's oh my God. Look, I'm with you generally in positivity about Kwesi. I think that the job that Kwesi has done to take this team from where they were in 2022 to where they are now, without really bottoming out, right? The worst season they had was 2023, where they went through half of that year with a scramble of backup quarterbacks. But otherwise being very much playoff contenders the whole time. Incredibly impressive, really great. I am with you that Kwesi should be extended. If you're wondering why it hasn't been by now, the Axis Vikings people say it should be before the draft. I wouldn't be surprised to see it after the draft, just by common sense. Man's busy. After the draft, he'll be a little less busy. Then he can get the contract done. So I'm not like stressing about that at all or anything like that. But O'Connell would be close to fired if it weren't for Kwesi. Is just out there, wild. You win. You did it. That's insane. He won Coach of the Year because of the stuff that the last guy said. I mean, Sam Darnold, Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, Kirk Cousins, even like all of that, I think is a testament to Kevin O'Connell's coaching ability, not to mention the locker room, the culture. There is so much that O'Connell has that's on his own, that doesn't have anything to do with Kwesi, that's giving him credit. That's given him much more credit in that org than Kwesi has. But that said, Kwesi's done a great job, and I think his contract is coming someday in the next few months, and then we're never going to talk about it again. It's one of those things that I don't think you have to worry about. All right, I will see you all tomorrow. Maybe some draft stuff? You into that? Let me know if you're into that. And as always, Skull.